Thank you, Leslie and Omar. Yes, I will. I will start my. I selected a few projects, mostly recent projects, and depending on time, well, I might show more or less videos. And oh, I have to show. Oh, yes. Sorry. And well, I apologize for any any glitch, but I'm not a pro at Zoom yet, so I'm giving you a preview of everything. Okay, so I'll start with the most recent project I did. It's called Chiperek, and Chiperek is the name of a farm. Plantation in Alta Verapaz, region of Guatemala. And it's a region, yeah, the Chiperec farm is now a Mayan women's cooperative. And there's a series of caves which are important ancestrally to the people there as sacred. And Chiparec means at the side of a cave entrance. So this image is from a German community in Guatemala at the time of the Third Reich. You can see the kids taking the class and the sort of the arms of Guatemala and the photo, of course, of Adolf there. And so it's part of the history of this farm, which I made a work around and researching. It's a work I did for Times Center in Berlin, and a show that opened not that long ago. And this is the piece. It's you know, like a stubby bush kind of a trunk suspended by black chains with beaded strings and medallions cast in resin. And the medallions have images from my research around this tea plantation. The tea plantation started, it started in the mid-19th century. It was sort of a time when, after independence from Spain, where Latin American countries were seeking to sort of whitening their populations. So they offered free land to mostly Belgium and German people who would want to come. From Germany, mostly private companies established a base there, mostly companies that had been formerly in the African the German colony in Africa. So there was this connection between the German colony in Africa and the people who were coming. And one of these folk who came brought with him sort of like a few goods from India. One of them being tea trees, cardamom bushes, I think coffee from East Africa, and things like that. So sort of like try out new crops. Because Guatemala at the time was at a crisis because it mostly created colors for the European market. It was a carmine made of cochineal bugs and also indigo made from the indigo plant. But once the British were able to chemically reproduce those pigments, then Guatemala was like, what do we do now? So then the Germans came with coffee and cardamom, which are still the major sort of like resources. And the particular thing about this is that tea trees coming to India had only been in India for about 10 years, since tea is native to China, and it's sort of like a part of a larger history, which is that China sold to England tea, porcelain, silk, and other luxury goods, while China only accepted silver for tea. So then this created like an imbalance, sort of like for the English, they felt an imbalance. And so their goal was to plan the weakening of China. And part of this, of course, is why we got opium wars, which is the intentional making of addicts of a nation, so that they would need to import something from the British colonies. And there was this medallion shows Robert Fortune. He was a Scottish soldier who volunteered to come to China and pass himself as Chinese, cross China and disguised. And then once in the region where the ancient tea trees grew, cared for by indigenous people living in the territory of China near the border with Vietnam, then he kidnapped some of the indigenous people along with some tea trees, and he brought them to India. And shortly after, this German guy brought them to Guatemala. And the plantation situation this tea plantation was one that replicated the conditions in which Germans treated people in Africa in their colonies. And also some of the people who belonged to the German colony in Guatemala were able to influence the treatment of indigenous people, like politics and sort of like policies, to reflect their own policies towards the people of Africa in their colony. Some of the other medallions show some of this. This is a little schoolroom. And apart from this, there's also, a new mixture, a new identity that happened in these plantations. And in Second World War, US intelligence recommended to Guatemala to disappropriate all Germans, and most notably the owners of this tea plantation, because they had evidence of it directly aiding the German side of the war, and also the shipping of arms when they shipped to Germany the tea that they grew, and other plantations the coffee. And so the plantation goes from a German-owned plantation to a Mayan cooperative in 1945, a women's cooperative. And sort of like, some of the images are kind of hard, and some of the experiences from the plantation are, especially during the Civil War, were very violent. But I sort of ended, I started the piece in my mind with a medallion that shows the indigenous people of China in their large, big tea trees. And then in Guatemala, what the Germans brought was this other technique of picking tea, where they sort of like cut the tree until the base so that it grows new every year, so that these trees, even though they're like 200 years old now, are still stubby and short, and they're really ugly. So this is what this tree is. And sort of to me, this piece was a bit about, this relationship between Asia and Latin America, and also like this shift of power and sort of like, this whole, and what does this mean now? And, part of the thing that I found really hard in my research was the connections between the German colony in Africa and Guatemala. That was really like, it was really like a connection that's important to me. And my next piece was sort of inspired by, sorry for the stock image, but inspired by, I did this workshop in Medellin before the pandemic, and it was around the collection of Colombian species by the new fad for collecting tropical plants. And I invited somebody from the Ministry of the Protection of, Flora and Fauna of Colombia. And the agent from the government, he shared this, the story that really affected me was that which I have no way to verify because I haven't seen it anywhere printed, was in the late 19th century, a French anthurium collector came to the valley of Medellin, and he found a particular looking anthurium, and he brought it back to Paris with him, where he found out, it hadn't been described, and he apparently, the agent said, he won a prize in France, and he felt very proud of his plant. So he went back to Medellin and asked all the farmers to bring him all the examples of this plant, and only to pour gasoline on all the plants collected because the agent said he wanted to be the only one with this anthurium. So the sort of like this story was really shocking, and of course I don't know if it's true, but at the same time for the government agent, it sort of, I think it was told to convey, I guess, his own sentiment that the flora of Colombia should be protected like an ancient monument, like should have like really strict laws, and that well, in his little presentation to the performance thing that I did about plants, that it should there should be some kind of program about repartition of this plants back to Colombia, because some of these plants have become extinct from poaching locally. So I did this series of paintings in the back of these sculptures. And the paintings are sort of like meditation on these leaves. And I left some parts blank. This series of paintings comes from some of my practice, which is wood cutting. And sort of like about 8 years ago, I started switching from printing on paper from woodcuts and presenting the plaque. And then, I'm changing it around to now just, adding color, because for most of the time, my work is black and white. And sort of like this, for me, this series is about this projection of nature and how we think of nature, and also like, I don't know, like feelings of, I don't know, like you feel kind of special sometimes when you look at a plant, like you have a connection that's not common. And then to accompany this, I made these other sculptures, which are part of the what we call in Guatemala the pito tree, which has a tree that you can eat. I think you can also smoke, and a lot of carvers use this wood because it's very soft. And my friend, who is now dead but was a Mayan priest, he said that this tree is, it's a god, so this tree is, you can worship this tree as a god. So I was interested in what this tree means, and my great grandfather was a believer in this tree, so just exploring this kind of making a connection between this sacred tree and sort of like this relationship with anthuriums. And my other project I'm going to show called Huertos de los Cholti, which I think, oh my God, I don't remember what it say in English, but it's, you know, like where they grow plants, you know, gardens of the Cholti. And it's also a newish piece I made, I showed earlier this year in TPA 21, Thyssen in Madrid. And in a way, it's similar to the tea piece. It's also like a curtain. It's 3 curtains. Each curtain is carried by a rod, and each rod is different plant. One of them is cacao, another one is vanilla, and another one is anato. And these plants during until the late 17th century, allowed a large ethnic group between Mexico and Guatemala called Chol to not be under European power. So it's 3 plants that, because they were very expensive in Europe and they could sell it to Europeans without letting them in, then it was a plant that, you know, allowed them to have, you know, economic strength and all these things. So it's just a piece where I was thinking about this, I don't know, this wonderful, wonderful trees, and also like the mythology around it, or at least the mythology that the Spanish created around them after they executed a complete genocide of this ethnic group. And this mythology that the Spanish had was that, you know, there were no more indigenous people in the area anymore. And yet the plants seemed as though somebody was gardening them. So like, sort of like this myth that they were gardened by phantom hands. And yeah, and this piece is part of another piece which I still have yet to finish, which is before the disappearance of this ethnic group, there was a priest who made a dictionary of their language. And sort of like this ethnic group still survives in very small amounts in the Mexican side. And the Mexican state also did a very bloody campaign to erase this ethnic group, but there are a few towns which speak this language. And so I had a young activist read the Guatemalan 17th century dictionary of this language to sort of like, even though we don't really know whether she's reading it correctly, because it's been 3 centuries, but, you know, sort of like this connection. But that's a piece which I still have yet to finish. This is a newer film I made before before lockdown. It's called Place of Solace. It's based on this 1960s. It's based on the censorship of a 1975 play called Heart of the Scarecrow. The play was adapted by the theater company of the popular university, Universidad Popular in Guatemala City. And they totally ignored the 1960s version, which came before, which was a bit, maybe not so original of a text, and a bit, I don't know, I think the playwright had hopes it would be made into a movie, so the language is a bit strange. And so the students made their own version, totally ignoring, improvising, and also, there's other techniques like stopping the audience and speaking directly to them. But this version of the play caused the worst censorship in Guatemalan history, which was death threats, the purposeful burning of the theater, and also this totally created a fracture in the art scene in Guatemala. And sort of like I grew up hearing about this play, Heart of the Scarecrow, but I didn't know what it was. I I'm part of like a generation, which actually there are some kids now, but in Guatemala City that are taken to the theater. Like I was taken to the theater like 3 times a week to see children's plays. And the censorship happened in that same theater, but like 10 years or 12 before I was born. And I always imagined it was a children's play, but it wasn't until 2013 when one of my uncles started telling me the story that he was a student in that play that was so censored and sort of like all this violence. And then I verified that in some books. And it sort of became interesting because many people who were in the play don't remember what exactly was so offensive, and they can't remember what happened. And there's really nothing. There's not even pictures of that production. So then I asked my friend Winston Gonzalez, who's a wonderful poet, to let's invent a script. So he wrote like a whole book, and then it's had many reiterations, and every time we do it, because his script is so big, then it's different. And this is a performance for video I made, and I made it in the theater, which was important to me, is to have the actual building with the censorship happen. And yeah. And the next project I'll show is this project on this. Oh my God, I'm totally in a history streak. But yeah, it's these chairs that were that were used. Well, there's a structure from Canada to all the way to South America that was used by indigenous people to carry things like carry goods, carry children, carry the sick. But in colonial and Republican times, this was taken advantage of, and it was used as indigenous men were used as things to carry. And this is a portrait of Frederik van Waldeck, which was a con artist in Europe who passed himself as a nobleman in the early part of the first part of the 19th century. And he famously went to Guatemala and Chiapas, say he could read the ancient hieroglyphs, and he's the one that saw like elephants and all this stuff that doesn't exist. And he did the self-portrait of himself as a dandy carried on the back of this larger than life indigenous man. So I don't know. And just to give another thing. These chairs were still used until kind of recently, and they were used by the hydroelectric company in Guatemala, which is a foreign owned, to install, to carry the electricians across the landscape to install electricity. So you're just playing with the chair. Also on my history streak, I made this piece called El Sexto Estado, which was a research on this failed nation in the early part of the 19th century between Guatemala and Mexico. It's in an area that was known ancestrally, or it is still known, parts of it as Quiche, which means land of many trees. And sort of like the forest and the trees are a big part of the identity of this area. And you can see here the area. And so I have these legs, which are, I think the largest one, I don't know, it's really, really, it's as tall as a tree. And in the middle, you have a reproduction of the throne of Atanaciotzul, who was an indigenous leader who strived for an independent Mayan government, Guatemala, in the early part of the 19th century, which was later misused by the nation as sort of like a George Washington, while ignoring, the racial, situation that he lived in. And this failed nation, Sexto Estado, or Los Altos, is now part of the sort of like the patriotic identity of Guatemala. And a lot of people see it as this oh yeah, maybe it would have been better if we were part of the nation of Los Altos, which was very French influenced, and I don't know, a nation in a different way, instead of being what Guatemala is now. But researching on this nation, I read a book by Arturo Terracena, who discovered that the whole workings of this nation and the whole reason this nation was wanted to be created was to reinstate slavery, because slavery of indigenous people had been banned in the 16th century, and slavery of African people had been banned when Guatemala declared itself independent from Spain. So this nation was just reactionary, just wanted to create just a white elite slave nation. So that was a really big, I don't know, creepy thing for me. These paintings I did in the second floor. This is Laboratorio, Siqueiros house in Mexico City, where I showed the sculptures was what was formerly his garden, and this is what's around what was his daughter's room. So I don't know, it was kind of creepy, and so I made these paintings using some of the materials that are important to the identities area in pre-Hispanic times. Part of the richness of this area was obsidian and jade, which they could trade with other people. And part of the other thing with white settlers who wanted to create this area its own nation was there was silver and gold. And so this painting has obsidian, crushed obsidian in its pigment. This one, silver leaf. And at the same time, I did this other piece. This is a picture of the Quetzaltenango, which was the capital of this failed nation. And these are, there's this ceramic tradition there, which is between Mayan and French. So I did this reproductions in styrofoam and resin of this, reproductions of ceramics with this wooden arms, which is a reference for me. A mythological story of the Maya was that some of the people that came before us were men made of wood, but these people were not, good at worshiping God. So then, or thanking anything, not even thanking their cooking utensils. So the cooking utensils rebel and beat them. So these are the, this is the installation I did for Site Santa Fe. And there's also this other piece called House at Cahuinal, which is the creation of is in the area of the creation of hydroelectric company in Guatemala, which is European owned. And this company has been a big burden sort of on us from the beginning. Part of the creation of the dam, it was quickly found out by French anthropologist Alain Breton to be very important for Mayan archaeology, because he has very, very old, it had very well preserved buildings, blah, blah, blah. So then the company gave them like 6 months to dig as much as they can. And these are the people who helped dug, which were from the towns around this ancient city. And after, after they got as much as they could out of the land, a lot of these people were massacred in the worst massacre we lived in our history, which was privately financed by this European hydroelectric company, and which is an ongoing legal case. This is the installation I did in New Museum in New York, and it was this reproduction of ceramics that were found by people before the creation of the dam, and also this ghostly figures, and this green. I painted the walls green, the glass was green, and the ceiling was green. So this is like, for me at least, this is watery feel to the whole thing. And I was thinking about all the people and what they left behind and their objects. And well, then we go to Freud. This is Freud and Little Hans. I don't know, when I was 11, I was really into Greek mythology. I accidentally took out a book called, which I thought it was about Greek mythology, but when I got home, I think it was the complete cases of Freud. And then I remember Little Hans, really, that little story of Little Hans really like hit me hard. And I remembered it the wrong way. I reread it as an adult and I was like, oh, I imagined those things. But I imagined Little Hans taking care of his little turds like little babies. And then this giant phantasmal giraffe. The part of him caring for the turds is actually mistaken. But he was obsessed with his own fecal matter and also wondering if babies were born from over there. And all this like relationship with feces, which I guess Freud read a lot into. And it was Freud's only direct child patient. So this is the one of the giraffe here is a hallucination that Little Hans has in the case, which is of a giant like crumpled giraffe, he calls it. And then yeah, so this is, oh yeah, he also has a vision of a little stork. I remember a shitty little stork, but I might be wrong. And sort of like this is like the fecal things levitating. And you can see here from behind this wall, there's a large sort of like floating fecal thing, which was, I don't know, anyway, so that piece comes from that place. I don't want to read much into my own history, but this was, and so we go back to my historical things. This is an installation I did in Bordeaux at CAPC. And I really got into Linnaeus and the botanical expeditions in Latin America. This is a drawing made but reinterpreted by a carver, engraver. It's a drawing based on a sketch that Humboldt did when he was in Colombia. And Humboldt was in Colombia and Venezuela and other places in Latin America, collecting plants. And while he was there, he had contact with botanists in Europe. And there's a history of this, like Mutis, which was a Spanish botanist brought in by, I think, the Catholic Church, had contact with Carl Linnaeus, who was the sort of like self-appointed authority on classification of plants. So this large installation had sort of like this metal structures, which to me reminded me of the metal structures in banana plantations in Guatemala, and so like conveyor belt system. And it was about like, because Humboldt and Mutis and Linnaeus were all part of this Enlightenment movement to bring back knowledge, to find useful things. But at the same time, a lot of these useful things carried with them, shipment of people, like Robert Fortune in China, bringing back indigenous peoples because they knew how to take care of the plant. So this movement of botany, and sort of like this piece is a bit, chocolate is really important in Central America to us. It's really something locally consumed. It's not for export, and it's something really important. But the same chocolate has been a very problematic crop now. And well, we go to our first video. This is Mimesis and Mimesis. I made it at the Tropen Museum. I don't know how to say that. In Amsterdam, which is a colonial museum created by the Dutch kings to sort of like show all the things they could bring from the colonies, but also in a pseudo-scientific way. And I'll stop the share for a moment while I I hope this is the right video, but anyway. Yes. Oh, sorry. Forgive me for my technical things. So I'll just show a little bit of this video. So this, this video which you hear in the background, it was sort of like to take advantage of facilities of, and also the history of this museum, and sort of like the furniture, so the gutted furniture, and then the furniture which is below me, and oh, sorry, I think I don't know if I'm still sharing the screen. I think I'm not, anyway. And then the relationship with like the collection, which is mostly, you know, like what you saw, the figures in the video. And it also has a collection of plants, you know, that's part of the museum. Anyway, I'm gonna move on. Sorry. One second. This is a performance I've never given an explanation for, but this is a version I did at KW in Berlin. I had these beds, sort of like some of them are 2 stacks, others are single, and all the beds have this mesh sort of like thing that holds up the mattress. So I ink the beds and the furniture in this performance, and I lay people down on the beds, marking them. And it was a large room, and I moved around marking people, or sometimes I mark the sheets or their clothes. And you know, I've never really given an explanation, but it's partly based on this torture technique that was widely used during the years of repression in Guatemala, which was to electrify a mattress, and then the marks of the victims would be left with this inked, well, this brown marks. Oh, I already did that one. Okay, illusion of matter. A more cheerful video. It's a, oh, sorry, I think I'm still sharing, sorry.
And a track. Full length.
switch props. Slowly introduce them. Count 1, 2, 3. Go to the middle of the hallway. Count 1, 2, 3. Go to the opposite. Count 1, 2, 3. Go out again to your original position. Stand in the middle though. 1, 2, 3. And go back to your original place. Destroy. Yeah, so I will wrap it up. So as you see, since this is work I'm still, doing, I don't really have that much of a perspective sometimes. This last piece, Illusion of Matter, was part of a series that I generously had from If I Can't Dance and other institutions in European Union, to commission an artist to do performances. And so I did this. This was the first in the series. It was done at the performance department of Tate Modern. And it's sort of like, the series for me was, I was criticized for a long while that I make a lot of art about the Guatemalan Civil War. Even, I lived it, and, it's not so much like history to me. And I also grew up with refugees from all over the world. So this was also part of my, like hearing them and, trying not to get triggered by their stories and try not project my own stories, but also listening. So it's about this mutual listening. And this piece was also, the children destroying, maybe it's in a way like my wish to destroy these sort of like this history and these things that sort of like influence my creativity, because these are the images that pop up in my head, and these are the histories that I want to tell, even though they might not make sense right now because they seem rather random. But anyway, thank you so much for listening.